This is Evolutionary Psychology, the podcast. I'm David Pietrzewski,
And I'm David Pinsoff. This is Actual Evolutionary Psychology by Actual.
evolutionary psychologist. David, did you hear that?
What? What?
Oh,
Not.
well, nothing in particular. I was just wondering because who we're talking to today is Greg Bryant, and Greg Bryant does all things acoustic.
That's right. We get into vocal communication, music, why different sounds evoke different emotions in us, whether those connections between sounds and emotions are arbitrary or whether they have sort of interesting evolutionary explanations.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think I think for me the mystery of why music makes us feel anything is was partially resolved by this, and I feel like Greg did an amazing job organizing my thinking. And I knew about Greg's work, but even this conversation for me really helped organize my thinking. For example, understanding, yeah, like what's up with music? Why do we feel emotions around that? Why is rock music the way it is? And how is it related to,
yeah. You
um,
will learn why
yeah,
electric guitars are distorted and
yeah.
what role that distortion is playing.
Yeah, the evolutionary psychology of overdrive. It should be
Yeah.
the title of of this episode, maybe. Yeah, and then we also talk about Greg's other work. We spent a lot of time on music, which is fantastic. Um, but we also do talk about some of his other work about, and we get toward the end we talk about humor and laughter.
Oh, yeah. Talked a lot about laughter and how it ties in with encryption theory and with my own work on mix-ups. It was a really fun conversation, and I learned a lot and had a great time.
Yeah, so this is in acoustic format. So sit back, enjoy, and listen. And yeah, you'll learn a lot and maybe think about what you're doing with your ears slightly differently after you do the following with your ears, which is a weird way to say that, but I guess
And
I'll stay
enjoy
with that.
listening to a podcast about sound with your ears.
Greg, we usually do just, like an introduction before you're on, so we'll just get right into it. Um,
Yeah.
if evolutionary behavioral sciences were a heist movie, you would be the acoustic expert, is sort of my representation of you. Have you always been an audiophile?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny you use the term audiophile because that does have a specific meaning, meaning that it's people that are into super high-end gear, and there's actually can be almost a religious element where you think there are differences in sound between the tube amp with the shielded cables,
Mm,
whatever.
yeah. Versus a solid state modeling amp that sounds exactly the same. And yeah.
That's the thing. So I usually land on that side of the debate because I'm a perceptual psychologist, Um, but I am an audiophile, and that's I was raised by audiophiles. My dad was into stereos, and he was a actually in the sound in the Army
Hmm.
Corps with yeah the radio corps. Sorry.
Oh, nice.
Army. So he was interested in that kind of stuff. And so we always had nice stereos and my dad was really into music and my brother got into that way. And then he's a software engineer who works on audio compression. So it's a sound situation in my family. So I guess that's where I get it. And then I was obviously very into music from a young age. And so, yeah, I've always kind of been into sound, and that was sort of my attraction to evolution and behavior was the connection between language and music and trying to think about, speech communication and vocal communication in general.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
awesome. I mean, learn versus innate is a dumb distinction, but I mean, it captures something in looking at your family and being like, wow, we're really all into music. Have you thought about, like, is it that because it was all around, or what's your take on those? Yeah.
Yeah, that must have played some role, right? I mean, it's hard to say, though. It's funny though, the music thing, they're into music listening, but not into music performance.
Mm.
So I had to beg my parents to give me any kind of musical instrument, and I didn't really get one until I was about 15 years old. I got an electric guitar, and at the time they were probably like, "This is why we didn't want to do this," because it was a nightmare
Because
for
you were
them.
like distortion. What was it? What,
It
what?
it was a Hondo Strat copy, and
Wow.
then a Sun 20-watt amp, which that I wish I still had that thing because Sun is a really cool make and it had a
Mm.
really good distortion built in. But I was into like speed metal and punk rock. I mean, it was probably a nightmare for them. But I mean, I would have played piano if I had one, and I wanted a guitar when I was 8 years old. I actually asked first for a guitar, and they just wouldn't give me an instrument because I
Mm.
think they had the classic, we're going to buy it for you, and then it's just going to sit around.
Mm.
And they didn't believe that I was really into it, and I was.
Right.
So, in that sense, they hindered my music
Yeah,
development.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I probably would, I would have different skills if I had learned instruments when I was 8,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, I mean, in some ways, maybe it would be better. I mean, I don't read music. I understand music theory, conceptually, but I can't sight read. And so if I look at some sheet music, I can't play it on the guitar without, I mean, it would be a lot of work for me to figure that out.
Mhm.
Um, and so that gives you different skills. Like, for example, I might have developed perfect pitch if I had learned the notes and the theory and the instrument when I was young. And now I'll never have perfect pitch. Once you're an adult, the evidence is pretty good that
Yeah.
once you pass that threshold, you never get perfect pitch. So I have good relative pitch. But yeah, so there's these certain little skills that you get when you learn early that are just obtainable later. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting combination. They were really into the listening, but not the playing.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
this is a PS. Sorry, David. PSA. If your kid wants to play music, my editorial here is let them, and if they don't use it, you can always put the thing on reverb and get a good
yeah,
resound.
let them if they want to, but don't push it on them either,
No,
because
yes,
that's
exactly,
another bad
exactly.
Exactly. That's the
extreme.
worst
Yeah,
Perfectly.
thing.
Yes. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I know so many people that were forced
Oh,
to take piano lessons that now have
yeah,
like an aversion. They don't even want to
yeah.
do anything.
Totally,
yeah,
David. Yeah, really
yeah,
good. Exactly. Just like horror. It's you
yeah,
let them be autonomous and
yeah.
let them do overdrive. You can give them headphones and stuff. Greg, can you talk about perfect pitch? Because that's like maybe a nice little hook into content. Because I've been reading into this too. I came across this because I had always had this toy idea that perfect pitch was just something people are born with or not. For people who don't know what it is, can you explain what it is? And then can you tell us if to the extent you know, I mean, I know this is not your primary research, but like what is the
Mhm.
state of the art that we know about it?
Yeah. Well, the idea of perfect pitch, my understanding, is that when a person can map a tone onto a note. So if you hear, a tone of whatever it might be, you can just say that's an A.
That's right. And
And
you, if you say like do an A, they can hum it or, yeah,
yep, they can
exactly. Yeah.
exactly. So they nail it right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's something that you learn that mapping between the sound and the category early. And because obviously the category is culturally constrained, there's no way it could be an A to know an A because A is a cultural invention.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
In German, it's like there's another different note. I know Annie always talks about that. That it's like it's
Oh,
a, it's like a different. There's like an H or something. It's like, I forget the details. I'm completely amusical, so I'm yeah.
Is it the phlegm
um,
note, the ch?
yeah, that's exactly. It's
Yeah,
right
guten
after the
Tag to
G.
all of our German friends. So yeah, es tut mir leid. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, you have to learn some system, and there's a lot of them out there potentially. So if it's learned within a critical period, which I think it's right in the language critical period, so it's kind of like before year 5. And people, a
Mhm.
lot of people say, I had perfect pitch and I never had music lessons. It's like, except that one time, they'd always, if you push them, they'd always, oh, there was one little thing. It doesn't take much, I think. Kids soak it up pretty fast. Once you pass that threshold, I think the evidence is that you can't learn it. So you have to have some sort of relative pitch to know, the difference between it. And so you have a reference pitch, then you can say what the note is if you're really good at it. You can learn
And,
that.
and can I just interrupt? Is it that because I mean, so I know somebody with perfect pitch. Like it's when they play a note or you do a note, it would be like asking the most people like what color is this? It's like, oh my gosh, of course it's red, right? It's like it's boring, and I'm just like I don't know how you do that. Is it that the lessons create the discrete mappings between the notes, or is it just that you need a linguistic label, but the cognitive shelf for that note is already there, if that makes sense, or if, I don't know if I'm making the,
Well, I mean, the instruments produce, there's not a lot of variation. So, I mean, if they learned with a bad piano, for
mm,
example, then that would probably screw the mechanism up.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because then people later would say they'd play A440 and then they learned it like A452.
Oh, I
Then
see.
they would, that might, I mean, that would be kind of a bad experiment to do.
Yeah.
Didn't do that. But I think that could mess it up. So
I
the thing
see.
is that people are learning with instruments that are tuned properly,
Mhm.
to like a regular piano that's tuned reasonably. But I mean, there's probably some error in there.
I see. So it's the
But then,
intervals. They're actually learning the
yes.
the fundamental frequency intervals, or like what counts as a step in a continuous range of frequencies.
They do, except actually you learn it without reference pitch. So you add a context, just one note, you
Hmm.
can do it. So that means it's not necessarily about an interval, because an interval is two or more
Oh,
notes
I see. I was using the
or
wrong
two
term. I
notes.
just meant a space. Sorry. I should just shut up.
Yeah.
I know nothing about music.
Yeah, the interval is a relationship between two notes.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And so they learn those too. And you learn the scales and all that stuff. You learn it in a different way when you're young.
Mhm.
But yeah, so but just out of context, they're doing a mapping to some category, whatever it might be. If it's, if you're Western music, then you're learning the letters. But then in another system, you're learning it in some other different way, but you're mapping the frequency to the category.
Got it.
So I'm curious. So what the relationship is between our representation of sound and the objective reality of vibrational frequencies? Because I know we were talking with Nick Graziano about the relationship between our representation of color and the objective facts about color. And we were going into this cool idea that like we view white light as like a kind of purity or absence of contamination, right? It's just like there's nothing there. It's pure and bright, but it's actually, if you look into the physics of it, it's the opposite. White light is all the different
Right.
wavelengths just sort of smushed together. And it's weird that our representation of white doesn't quite fit the objective reality of it. There are plenty of other ways in which our representation of color doesn't quite fit the objective facts of color. Like, if I see a red object in different lighting conditions, the frequencies of light that are hitting my retina are going to be very different, but I'm still going to see it as the same color. This is color constancy. We see an object that looks
Yeah, that's a crazy
looks the
effect.
same. Yeah,
Mhm.
crazy. That like the objective frequencies of light are totally different, and yet it seems exactly the same from our perspective because color is designed to identify and differentiate objects and not to necessarily accurately represent reality. So, are there similar ways in which our representation of sound is different from the objective physics of sound, or is it more accurate than it is with color, or how do we think about this?
That's a great question, and I don't think I have a great answer other than I would suspect, I think it's more accurate
Hmm.
that those properties in the world are there to a more substantial degree, whereas color is reflected off. I mean, some would argue there is no color in the world in a sense, right? That
Yeah,
it's like we're constructing it,
yeah.
and it does change in context considerably. I mean, there are contextual effects, I think, in sound where. Um, the same sound presented in two contexts would be perceived differently and then represented differently.
Oh, interesting. So it's
But
like sort of an analog to color constancy.
I think there's some similarities there, though I
Yeah.
can't really come up with a really great example exactly. But in like auditory scene analysis, which is the study of how people perceive the auditory environment, how you localize a sound, and how you decide that these frequencies should belong in this belong to this source and these
Mhm.
frequencies belong in this source, even though it's coming in as a wash of
Mhm.
frequencies, we have this coherent separation of sounds that seems like that sound's coming from there and that's coming from there, even though all these frequencies are all around you and you have to parse it.
Mm.
So in that sense, you're constructing these representations of things that are probably not completely accurate as a function of what they really are and what those things are emitting.
Mm.
But I think it's more accurate than in color. Color seems to be more constructed, but
Mm.
I'm not going to bet much on that conjecture. But I mean, a fundamental frequency is a fundamental frequency, and I think we're detecting that in sources that have it in a way that is pretty. The mapping is pretty isomorphic.
Yeah.
Is-
I mean, it seems like the selection pressure for auditory scene analysis or knowing when certain sounds are coming from a particular source would be, there'd be huge selection pressure on that. Like to know, to differentiate the
Well, no,
birds from the rustling in the leaves, from the potential sound of a predator or someone else sneaking up on you. Like being able to make those fine-grained distinctions probably would have had huge fitness implications.
yeah,
So
like how big is it?
yeah, how big is it? Yeah. Is it approaching? Is it receding? Those are really important distinctions, survival relevant distinctions. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
But there are, I mean, that's you just brought up a good one, like John Newhoff stuff with auditory looming, right? We
yeah.
overestimate how quickly something will arrive, and we don't have that same thing for a thing that's moving away from us. So there
Mm.
are going to be various kinds of, air management issues and distortions and
Yeah. Greg,
Mm.
I wanted to ask, either you can pick which one you want to do. One is I have this feeling that like vision science has its own conference. Does acoustics have its own science, and is it as
Sure, yeah.
large? Like I feel like as an intro
No,
psych professor, I teach vision. I don't teach acoustics. I feel like acoustics gets the shaft a bit compared to like the other perceptions.
totally. The main journal, one of in my opinion, the best journal in the field for acoustics, JAZA, Journal of Acoustical Society of America, its impact factor is like 1.4. I mean, it's not there's not a lot of work. I mean, there is a lot of different kinds of stuff like underwater acoustics, and I mean,
Yeah,
it's a crazy field, and a lot of it is not psychophysics. A lot of it's just pure. It's just engineering and
yeah,
it's other not psychology or even behavioral science at all, but. Yeah, no, there is definitely an acoustics field. It's way smaller than vision. I mean, when you have like acoustic perception, sound perception, that's definitely a lot, there's a lot less work out there, a lot less
yeah.
people doing it.
I realize this even because, we've done work together, and even I did social categorization work where I started with visual cues like race or team membership visually marked, but I wanted to get into accent and then like starting to make the acoustic stimuli. And, I consulted with you about how to do it, but I realized like there is very much a modality bias in the behavioral sciences. I feel like, at least from what I've seen. And it sounds like that might be true. And is that because or why is that? Like,
I mean, it's a good question. Um, What I do think is auditory perception and vision perception share this feature that they've made a lot of progress in understanding how the brain does it because of an inherent functionalist perspective from the beginning, right? So people have been studying auditory perception since Helmholtz.
hmm,
And so I think we, like vision perception, we have actually a better understanding relative to other areas of our psychology. We understand vision better because I think of the functionalist perspective and being able to come up with theories that are testable about how, and then you can look at how it happens in the brain. So there are auditory perception people out there, but I think one reason, I mean, you could say this for vision too, but I think one reason is there's a technical constraint that you have to really get into the acoustic theory, and you also have to be able to learn how to do acoustic analysis, which until recently was actually rather hard. And this is a funny thing with Lita. One of her first papers, um, she
hmm,
was doing analysis, and it's really I love this paper, and it had a huge influence on me. It's called Acoustic Invariances in the Expression of Emotion in Speech, and it was her honors thesis that she did in as an undergrad, and published in JP, of course, like all honors theses
yeah,
end up.
exactly.
Um, and I really love this paper. And then when I approached her early on, I was interested in working with them. And she said that gave her PTSD. I mean, it was so hard to do that analysis that she was like, I'm never doing acoustics again. She hated it
Yeah,
because it was really difficult in those days. You didn't have software that did it. And so you had to actually fire up the oscilloscope. And I mean, it was kind of a nightmare. And so I think that probably had an impact on how people choosing that as an area of study because there was sort of a high learning curve,
yeah,
especially back in the day.
Hmm.
Now you have software packages that are relatively easy to use. If you know how to use R, you can figure out how to do a lot of these things. And Pratt is a standalone program that allows you to do acoustic analysis. And so more people are doing it, which has the downside of people doing it and they don't really know what they're doing.
right.
So, but more people are doing it because it is accessible. And so I think that it's probably going to get better, but for some reason, a lot of people just are not drawn to doing that kind of work where you're doing psychophysics essentially.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
Yeah, I always talk about my favorite movie is Jurassic Park, and I've watched it so many times, and like what I realize after watching it multiple times is the sound engineering is so important for highlighting, and Spielberg does this with all of his movies, is the sound tells you what to look at in the scene, and you don't even
Right.
realize it, but like yeah, it's just such an interesting thing of like sound is so important. And but it's just I find it funny that it is so there's so much instinct blindness generally, but then
Right.
even among like behavioral scientists who take an evolutionary approach, there's like I feel like there's just not enough acoustic work. Like it's like extra instinct.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, vision too, really, there's not that many people that are doing vision perception in EvPsych. I
Mm,
mean, you have
Yeah.
people in doing cognitive psychology and psychophysics that do vision. Like we had one guy in my department where I went to grad school, Bruce Bridgman, who was into evolutionary psychology too. But you know, there almost nobody in EvPsych does that, right? I mean, there was Josh New
yeah,
did that kind of stuff, and then he left
yeah.
academia.
Russell Jackson sort of doing his like
Russell left academia
oh
too.
he
He
did.
was
I didn't know
doing,
that. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so,
And of two,
yeah,
if you
it's
go into vision, you're gonna leave. Yeah.
yeah, don't say that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's for some reason psychophysics is not really t taken hold in evolutionary psychology, unfortunately. I thought it would have by now, but
Yeah. That was, and I was going to give you a choice, but that was the question. The other question, like, because this is a big, hard question, and maybe we can just pause it. But my great mystery, and the thing I wanted to ask you more, is number one, what's up with music? And number two, I asked a bunch of people, like I told people you're coming on, and everyone wanted to know what your take on music was. And number two, what I find a mystery, and David has alluded to this, is number one, what's up with music? But number two, and equally, why are emotions hooked up to these weird vibrations in the air, such that a vibration in the air can make me feel a certain way and really feel that way in a way that so many other things cannot. Like that is
right.
weird. I would never have predicted that, like from first principles, at least for me. And it's just it's just so obvious, and it's such a weird thing. I feel like.
Yeah. So you're saying like vocal emotion communication or something, right? Is that what
No, I
you
mean like if I'm in a concert and there's a symphony in front of me, that symphony can
that it's a
control my
powerful experience to
emotions.
hear this
Yeah,
loudly.
and it's just like that is such a wow, how is that? Why is an evolved
You'll
organism?
feel sad
Yeah,
when the strings get lugubrious, and you'll feel excited when you feel afraid, like it can elicit all these different emotions based on the type of, the difference between minor and major, minor being more sad and gloomy. Like this is like it's
Yeah.
so hooked up with the emotions. Like
yeah.
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 Lugubrious is a good word,
So,
David.
well, my take
Thank you.
on it is that it's basically that vocal communication of emotion is underlying all of that. And then
Mm,
cultural evolution has built, I mean, this is the simple answer. We can get into it in more detail, but that cultural evolution has like built this whole set of systems, technology, and practices that have allowed us to make these huge sounds, like huge orchestras and giant sounds in movies and everything. But that the underlying sensitivity to it is because we're sensitive to emotions and voices.
mm,
And the reason that we are adapted to paying attention to emotion and voices because it's a really good mode of communication at a distance in particular, right? You don't need to see my face, so I can give you information at a distance and allow you to make judgments about whatever situation is going on based on my emotional signal. But I really think cultural evolution has then built on top of that this super stimulus, right? So we have a sensitivity to the sound frequencies because we have to pay attention to other people communicating with us. And then it just has been elaborated. I mean, if you have a super stimulus, then you're going to have a super response.
yeah,
I mean, that might not be the most satisfying answer, but
yeah,
I think that it's probably some version of that, that we have an adaptation for detecting emotions and voices.
yeah. Does
I think
that?
a lot of these things
Oh yeah,
arrive
yeah.
from voices.
This might be a dumb question, but like we also have words and linguistic labels for emotions. Like if I'm mad, I could say I'm pissed off. If I'm sad, I could say I'm sad. But if we just hear the words I'm pissed off or I'm sad, it doesn't have the same emotional effect than if I were to hear a symphony playing sad sounding
Right.
music, or like a punk rock band like playing angry sounding music with like a distorted guitar. Like there's something different about the sound than about the label, even though so what's different there? Like shouldn't the label be having the same effect if it has the same function to inform me about the emotion?
Right. I mean, the label is conceptual, right? And
Hmm.
so you're informing somebody of a concept that then they can figure out might have something to do with your internal feeling. But the sound is actually directly reflecting your feeling and it's
Hmm.
inducing the listener. And so that's the ancestral evolved capacity that's as old as mammals, where you by producing a fear scream, you induce fear in your audience,
Hmm.
right?
Or even like a high-pitched string that kind of sounds reminiscent of a scream could have the same effect. Like the shrieking thing from Psycho that like the violin sounds a lot like a scream and
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's right. It's got high
Hmm.
frequencies, they're
Yeah.
dissonant.
Hmm.
And so that dissonance is reflective of a highly aroused vocal communication system that's blowing out the system a little bit, right? If I scream loud
Hmm.
enough, the
Mm.
amplitude is such that the waveforms can't resolve in my system. And so it's just like a speaker that can't handle the amplitude. And so you get this distortion that indicates you're overblowing the system, and
Wow.
that is going to be associated with high emotion. And then when you perceive that as an animal with the ability to map that sound onto some sort of physiological state of the sender, and then that arouses you to actually have that state to some extent as well.
So that's a very
Interesting.
reductive stance to rock and roll and overdrive and rock and roll. Yeah,
Yeah. So Paul and I have a paper on that exact topic that just
that's
came out
awesome.
recently.
Awesome.
About the cultural evolution of distortion. And yeah, I mean, maybe that's a sad for punk rock or whatever, but I
No,
mean,
it's
Wait,
awesome.
so interesting. So when we hear a scream, we're responding not only to the pitch but also to the distortion.
David, you're getting an echo. I
yes.
think your mic is still on. Yeah, for some reason.
Speaking of
Speaking of
sound,
audio, yeah,
yeah,
we've
what is
never
going
had
Yeah.
on?
audio issues before,
Is that
but Greg is here, so
did it go
we
away?
Oh,
got
I
Am I
bring
good?
it
audio
went
issues
away.
with me,
Yeah.
man.
Okay, that's weird.
I
Anyway, so are
got
are
lots of
we
audio issues.
Yeah.
so when we feel afraid at the sound of a scream, what is triggering it is
That's the pitch.
simultaneously the pitch and the distortion?
Right. And which is a function of the loudness.
Right.
Hmm.
But yeah, so there are not what we call nonlinearities.
Yeah.
This is kind of what in bioacoustics, with the category of different properties of the sound that are have that association with harshness. So there are subharmonics. There's chaos. That's basically broadband kind of noise. That's the one that I think is most used in music. But then you also have other kinds of um, side bands and other little weird phenomena that are oftentimes just bands of energy that are not in the harmonic series, and so they can create these sort of dissonant kind of sounds. But the deterministic chaos is the one that I think is the closest to distortion, which is just broadband noise.
That's a great
So
band name if nobody's done that.
Right. Yeah,
broadband
totally.
noise.
No, deterministic chaos. Deterministic chaos. That's a great band
So So it's interesting. So in terms of, the evolution of signaling, what we're talking about is an indice, where it's not necessarily a costly signal. It's just that there's something about
A little
intrinsic to
bit.
the production of the signal that makes it a reliable cue of, say, physiological arousal, that just as a byproduct of the body amping itself up and pumping itself full
Yeah.
of energy and tensing muscles and tensing vocal cords, it will, as a byproduct of that, raise the pitch and the distortion of what's coming out. Is that
Yes.
basically? Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I think these things started as cues and then they get
Yeah.
ritualized into
Yeah.
signals. And so then those nonlinearity features, nonlinear
Cool.
features, would be exaggerated, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah,
Got
and
it.
so Greg, this byproduct idea or this elaboration, cultural evolution, evolutionary byproduct idea, does it? No, I have two questions. One is the idea that there are design features that it's really about conspecific vocalization, or is it a broader thing where it could be other animals, or like
Definitely
just
could
the
be other
acoustics,
animals.
or even the acoustics of non-living things, or is it really seem like it's about living vocalizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some general principles of the sound features of stuff in the world, that, if you hear a big sound like of trees falling
Yeah,
down,
exactly.
that's scary. It's not because it's derived from your perception of animal vocalizations,
Yeah,
right? And so we have all kinds of auditory scene analysis mechanisms that are,
right.
but the So something,
but the emotionality, the claim is that it seems to have design features that are for the living world
yes.
vocalizations.
And for the other animals as well as people, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
interact with other animals, you want to know if you're going to get bit
Yes.
or
Yeah.
killed or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, if other
So,
animals are screaming, that's important information for you as
Yeah.
well. Yeah,
Yes. You're like, nope, not my
well, and that'll
species. I
scare
don't
the
care.
hell
I
out
don't
of you.
care.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, a big dog that is growling at me is going to scare me as much as almost any person would,
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, in the right context.
Okay.
Um, though I like dogs so much, I might be like, oh, come on, it's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
But so we're definitely there's actually an interesting paper showing that people can detect arousal and vocalizations across all animal kingdoms. So
Wow.
even like insects make, and
Wow.
Wow.
frogs and birds, and I mean all kinds of animals have the same kinds of properties in their threat displays, which is that there's
Hmm.
noise and it's loud,
And
and people
yeah.
can arousal even in very distant animals, and so probably all animals have that basic
So
ability.
is interesting. So is the thing that we're picking up on loudness and distortion that the louder and more distorted it is, the more we infer physiological arousal?
Yeah. I mean, that's what has been shown now. I mean, I feel like there's another element that I've been struggling to measure, and other people, nobody's really got a good handle on it, but it's vocal effort. And
Hmm.
so you can kind of tell where in the range of effort is a person at any given moment. So if I'm really, even if I'm in a distance and the sound is quiet, you can tell I'm screaming my brains out.
Yeah. Right.
And
Hmm.
it's not the absolute loudness that's giving you the information. So
Yeah.
there's something about telling where people are in their range, and I think it's true for pitch as well. So you
Wow.
can tell where people are landing in their ordinary pitch range, and we're usually more towards the low end, right? So I can go much more high than I can go down,
Hmm.
right? So I mean, I could go down a little bit, but I mean, I can get up there, and so we can tell where people are in their range. And so, people like Dave
Wow.
Feinberg and others have done research showing that when guys try to be lower pitched than they really are, that people can tell, even though they're not that much lower than their baseline. So if I'm just like
Interesting.
this all the time, it sounds like I'm trying to be low.
Hmm.
And so that vocal effort and also pitch effort, or whatever you might call it, I think is an interesting thing that's really not been explored. And I think it's hugely important because how people manipulate that in a given context could be important for, figuring out what they're intending. And
Interesting. Can we, so I really like the example of hearing a scream from far away, that we still know it was a scream, even though it sounds quiet to the ear. It's sort
and
of
we can tell
analogous.
that they're screaming as loud as they can.
Yeah, which is really interesting. I mean, it's sort of analogous to distance perception. So, like something that's far away, like a big bear that's far away, we can still tell it's big. It's a big bear, but
Right.
the
You have
actual
context
stimulus hitting
though.
our retina is quite small, which suggests that we have algorithms for telling us that yeah, this may seem like it's small, but it's actually big and it's far away. Or similarly, this might seem like it's a quiet sound, but it's actually a really loud sound coming from far away. Like it
Yeah.
seems like that would be
Yeah. Like a
pretty
train.
complicated.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a train. You're like, oh, that sounds huge, but it's like not as loud as like the baby that's
A little
next
bird.
to you
Yeah.
talking, or whatever, crying. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, with vision, you often have context that the sound doesn't provide.
Hmm.
So if you see a bear, I mean, even if you don't know bears are big, you see a thing and you go, I can tell how far it is. I can see the trees, and that thing must be pretty big if I can see it from here. So the context helps a lot. Whereas if you just saw a dot on a screen, a bear in a distance without any context, you wouldn't know. But if you heard a sound, no matter what, you'd be able to
Yeah.
hear something without
Yeah.
context.
Yeah.
Hmm.
This is anecdotal, but people talk about how cellos are very close to the frequencies of human voices, and that is also very emotionally evocative. Number one, is that true? And number two, if so, is that evidence for that there is a privileging of like conspecific acoustics in the
I would
emotional?
argue almost all instruments are in the range
Oh,
of
okay,
Hmm.
vocal production, but the cello is probably, um, if you rank them, that would probably be up there pretty high.
okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and so yeah, but most instruments are in the voice range.
Okay, so if
Interesting.
we were aliens, if there's aliens and they do music, it's probably going to be their instruments are going to be in their conspecific vocalization range.
Or that's not even sound.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Non-sound
that
music. Yeah.
that's interesting that there are a lot of logically possible instruments that we could have created, but we didn't because they're not in the range. They don't emit sounds that are in the range of human vocal communication, so we don't find them interesting or engaging.
Exactly. I mean, we
Yeah.
could have instruments that play, where the normal range is 10K or something, which is a super high pitch. We can hear
Yeah.
it. Actually, I might not be able to hear that anymore. But normal people under 40, whatever,
Yeah.
can hear
Normal people
that.
under who are under 40.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a lot of people can hear 10K. And so you don't have an instrument that plays at 10K.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's
No, that
cool.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That's super
So
cool.
we want it in that sweet spot. And so what would be interesting would be just to see you know, show. I mean, all instruments have to play within the scale too, the normal scale, which is A440 for Western music, meaning that the note of A is 440 hertz. So that's just right there in the voice range. But it'd be interesting to see the distributions of different instruments and then compare that to voices. And I bet you it would be the voice distribution would look like this, and all the other instruments would be all like this, clustering around it.
Hmm.
That's so
Okay.
cool.
So fear is like you got the distortion, the vocal effort, and the high pitch. It seems like anger would be similar components because when you're
Yep.
pissed off, you're also physiologically aroused and potentially ready to fight. But instead of a high pitch, it would be a low pitch because you want to convey formidability. Presumably, lower pitches convey larger size. And so
Right.
anger would be something like distortion, vocal effort, and low pitch. Is that the idea there?
Yeah. Yeah, well, so loud and low actually correlates with physical strength. So
Oh,
if you can
okay.
keep your voice loud and low at the same time, just loudness actually is the best predictor of physical strength.
Oh,
The
really?
louder you can produce a sound is correlated with your upper body strength. So how much can you bench press or how your grip
Wow.
strength or something like that. Whereas pitch doesn't correlate with strength, which is an interesting
Hmm.
thing that you would think is true, but it's not.
Hmm.
David Putz and I differ on this a little bit. We debate about that because he's the only one that actually can show is ever shown that there's a relationship between pitch and strength. I've tried to do it a bunch and I can't show that, and other people can't show it. So
Hmm.
we debate that. He had, and now we have a paper actually together that I guess will come out someday that is a meta-analysis that is showing at least a small effect of pitch. I'm not really a big believer in the pitch strength connection.
Hmm.
But
Could it
loudness
be
for sure is
size?
there.
Could it be size rather than strength? Just like if you have bigger vocal cords or just a bigger body, it's going to be more resounding and lower pitched. And so it's and size is a kind of a cue of formidability, but it's not strength per se. Would you buy
Right.
that?
The problem is that vocal folds don't really scale with body size.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Is it
So you could have
format
somebody who
dispersion?
is a little person who has just the same size head and vocal folds as a person who's 6 feet tall.
Oh, really?
Um, and,
So
and
where's this? I
so
have this idea like from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. When you shrink something, they go, yeah, that little tight. Yeah, well, is that a myth? Like if you shrink something, it doesn't necessarily have
if
a
you
higher
shrink the
pitch?
kids with a magic machine, I think you might get a slightly different sound in their voices. Yeah, actually,
Okay.
right? Because everything is smaller, including their
Oh,
vocal
okay.
folds,
Okay, but the
right?
but the vocal folds
But
don't necessarily scale with the rest of the body. Okay.
they don't. And actually, the vocal folds are unconstrained by other morphological features in the larynx. So you can
Hmm.
get huge vocal folds that are differentiated at puberty from testosterone in small people who are skinny, short, weak people can have like these ridiculous vocal folds potentially because of the actions of testosterone.
Hmm.
But testosterone doesn't really correlate with strength either. So higher testosterone doesn't
Hmm.
mean you're stronger.
Is it maybe
The
picking up on just like adult maleness?
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that would
Um,
also be a cue of formidability. And
well,
adult men are
in
going to
the
be
grand
more
scheme
formid.
of the big
Yeah.
picture of humans, that yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's why you would see sex differences. Originally, people showed that low pitch was stronger, but then when you control for sex, that effect goes away. Um,
Hmm. Okay.
and so, but the one thing I like about it occurred to me that, what happens when people get stronger by training? How does their voice change? That I think thought about that for a minute, and I thought, okay, that's why pitch is not a thing. When you lift weights for a year and you get a lot stronger, your voice doesn't go down, right? But you do get better ability to push air with the muscles that control the airflow in your lungs. Those are
Hmm.
stronger, and so you can push air out more forcefully. So then you could produce a louder vocalization. But
Mm.
then when you are produce a louder vocalization, it makes the voice pitch go up because that's one of the
Mm.
mechanisms of pitch change. There are two. One is tightening the vocal cord, the vocal folds with these muscles in the larynx, and the other one is just pushing air through the system harder, and then that makes the vocal folds vibrate faster.
Mm.
So when you go up in volume, you go up in pitch. And
Mm.
so it seems to be your ability to mediate that increase in pitch when you increase the subglottal air pressure. It seems to be associated with actual strength. So keeping it loud and low at the same time, and then that relates to physical strength.
Greg, what is format dispersion? You've told me for years. I still don't know what it is. And does that relate to physical size? And is that part of what we're talking about without using the technical language? Or is
Yeah,
format dispersion something different than size and strength and loudness?
it's not. I think there's evidence that it's correlated with strength to the extent that body size is correlated with strength. So it's not giving you any other information. Format dispersion essentially is the average distance between formants in the signal. And the formant is a resonating frequency that is a function of the shape of the vocal tract. So you have the source, which is the air coming up from your lungs. It goes through your vocal folds. The vocal folds vibrate at a certain rate, and then that determines the source fundamental frequency. But then that sound goes through the vocal tract, through up your
Mm,
throat and out of your mouth. And there's these resonating cavities in your mouth and your nose and in the back of your throat. And so those resonating chambers cause the signal to have certain frequencies be amplified.
I see.
So those are the formants.
I
And
see.
so the because it's just a physical
Mm,
calculation of seeing how distant are those acoustically, and it's inversely related to the length of the tube. So formants that are closer together come from a longer tube.
okay. Yeah. And so
So
just to analogize it in a guitar, like an acoustic guitar, you've got all the different frequencies or pitches being done by the strings, but then the body itself of the guitar is a resonating chamber. And that's
right.
going to, and analogously, like basically our vocal cords are like the strings of a guitar, and then our heads, in a weird way, are like a guitar body, is what
Yeah,
you're
I mean
saying.
the
Yeah.
guitar is different enough where it's a little weird, but I think a
Mm,
better analogy is like a sax.
okay.
Or a wind instrument where this you actually have a source coming from the
I
mouth.
see. Yeah.
That's the thing you produce, and then it goes through the body
Right.
of
The
the instrument
tubes. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Okay.
modulate.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
If you
yeah,
have
that's
like
it.
a bigger head, are you going to make different? Is it gonna, that like a lower pitch sound? Like if you have like a
You
more
sound like you've got a
resounding.
big head. Yeah.
I don't know. Let's get some data.
Yeah.
Um,
Get some calipers out. Oh,
it,
yeah. That's,
I mean, I don't. That's. I've never really thought about the big head issue, but yeah, probably that would have some consequences for sure.
yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
mean, a big head is going to probably have a longer vocal tract for one,
Okay.
but that's not quite what you're getting at, and
Or even
there
just
might
like a
have some
more hollow
differentiating.
head, like more space in there to resound.
Yeah, the format dispersion intelligence
Oh
hypothesis.
my
Yep.
God.
Um,
This thing writes its.
yeah, small brain, big skull.
Like,
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
well, we're
So
25 episodes in or something like that, and now we're getting into bad psych. Okay. This was the line. All right, let's do it.
yeah, nice. Well, so you can see how format dispersion is related to body size, right? It gives you a
Okay.
pretty much an index in the length of the vocal tract, which is
Okay.
correlated to body size. And this is true across mammals. I mean, it's not a huge effect, but it's much bigger effect than pitch for in
Okay.
terms of relating to strength and body size. Well, body size even. So low pitch
Interesting.
isn't really related to body
So
size.
what does it sound? What does format dispersion sound like if not pitch?
Um, So if you heard the pitch of a sound, it would, you know, I mean, I could, if I
Like
was
baby
prepared, I'd
cooing,
be able to
baby
Is it
play.
like the
cooing. It sounds
timbre of
like
the
baby.
sound?
It's like
It,
the difference between
it's,
baby cooing because we did the Greg and I did the stimuli and I had the same question. And for me, at least, the intuition is you can imagine a baby like making a low pitch sound, but it kind of sounds like cooing. Like
Hmm.
kind of like if you just imagine like a baby kind of making a noise, vocalizing, but it's kind of a deep for a baby vocalizing. And then imagine like a whale producing, and you kind of get that. I don't even know how to articulate it verbally, but at least it kind of captures like imagine what a baby sounds like and what a whale sounds like, but they're both making low pitched noises.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, that's interesting.
Is it like a
That's
kind
quite
of
a
like
morphology under there.
reverbiness?
I think the four-man, I mean, if you're asking what the four-mans are, what they sound like relative to the source, think of just the source being something like, I mean, it's just a noise like that, maybe a little cleaner than that.
Yeah, it's
Then the
too it's
formats make vowels. So it's like A, E, I, O is I'm adjusting the format. I'm adjusting the formats because I'm adjusting the resonating chambers in my mouth by moving my tongue around and stuff like that. So the formats are like the vowel sounds think about vowels changing across the different vowels. That's
Hmm.
the action of formant shifting,
Oh,
especially the
okay.
first, right? And then the underlying pitch of the voice, which is just the source sound of, think of it as it's not really any vowel. I mean, it's probably closest to ah, which is open, like
Hmm.
the open
Right. So if I'm singing the
sound.
same note and I go ah ooh ee, like the change in the vowel represents the shift in the format.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And
Okay.
so,
Cool.
and then, you probably inadvertently raise the pitch a little bit when you are like, sometimes there's a perceptual interaction, but I mean, in theory, these things are independent dimensions, the source and the filter. Though E would sound higher pitched, maybe people might make that judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we got fear, we got anger. What's going on with sad, lugubrious strings?
yeah,
Why?
or reflection, or why does it make
Yeah.
must reflect too? Because I think there's also
Yeah.
like it's not just like seeing a snake; it also feels like it controls our thoughts. To put it too crudely, um,
Hmm.
right? Like, why do I feel reflective?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Um, I mean, when you're sadness, you're trying to solicit assistance at some level. If you take like the Ed Hagen-like approach to communicating sadness, which I like, there's something about you're expressing a state that is not an immediate state about a moment where you need to act quick. It's more of it's something about a long-term situation, and you're
Mm.
soliciting support in some way, or you need whatever you need at least to check on who's your ally and I mean it depends on the context. So I think that I like the idea of it invoking inflection or a reflection because you have to think about like what is happening, what is being communicated. It's not as simple as something like I'm going to attack you or I'm scared of a thing. It seems like it's about other more complex long-term phenomena.
Yeah,
So
and I don't want to be like we're all in this journey together. Like I don't want to do a gotcha thing here, and I'm not doing it in this spirit. But like one thing that I'm puzzled by is why there's fluidity with first and third person. Like why is it that if I hear sad music, I don't just react as if I'm hearing something else that's sad? Why is it
right.
that it feels like it's in my head? Like I think that's the other part of it is like
Mm.
why is it almost equally likely that it's almost as if this it's coming from me, which
Right.
feels right. Like,
Right.
and I don't know if that's
Or,
again,
or at the very least, like someone you care about. Like you could imagine
yeah,
like your enemy being sad and you not feeling sad, right? In
yeah,
fact, you might even feel happy because your enemy is
right.
sad, right?
Yeah, but I'm like
But
a
when you,
whimpering animal. It's not like I'm like, oh, where's the whimpering animal? It's like who's sad around me. It's like I hear sad music, and all of a sudden I'm like starting to reflect on the things that either were sad for me or
Sure.
might be sad. Why is it in me? Yeah.
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the first past answer is that it's also because of affect induction, which is what I mentioned before, like the fear scream makes you scared,
yeah.
right? And because that causes an adaptive reaction. And so I think all of emotions are communicated could have that kind of inducing effect,
Mm,
right? I mean, it's contagious. And so sadness can be contagious, as can happiness. Laughter is very contagious. And obviously, fear and anger are contagious as well. And so I think what you're describing could be some kind of conceptualization or conceptual, um, translation of this inducing sadness effect.
mhm.
Hmm.
That would be my first pass answer. I have to think about that for a little bit, though.
Yeah.
I would
Sadness
also
is an interesting one. Yeah,
Yeah, I would also bet that sadness would be lower in vocal effort, lower in distortion, lower in volume,
definitely.
because in
Yeah,
that case, what you're signaling is that you're not physiologically, or that you're depleted
down
in
regulation.
terms of, yeah, down regulation. You're defeated, you're tired, you're immobilized, you're incapacitated, whatever. Like when you're in a sad state, your energy reserves are much lower, and that is what is being signaled, presumably. Like
Yes.
if I think of like a lot of sad music, it's often very quiet. Uh,
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And there's, I mean, the melodic contours are very much like sad vocals,
mm,
sad speech. And you were talking earlier about, you know, why certain tonality, or how did you put it? I mean, there's tonality and scales and other kinds of musical features are associated with the emotions in the speech. So when we're speaking in more sad tones relative to anger, for example, there are different kinds of frequencies that are highlighted that are associated with those kinds of melodies.
mm.
And so, like all these different kinds of musical properties are you can show have been derived directly from the vocal expression of them. So that regulation, the descending contours in the melodies, and yeah, you don't have evidence of high arousal, so there's not distortion, I mean, a sad song with distortion ends up, I mean, I guess you can have sad punk rock or whatever, and it has distortion in it at some level,
Kind of
but it's
sounds like an
still,
oxymoron. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
I
I don't
can't,
know if you heard,
I'm having a hard time imagining like a sad electric guitar, or a sad loud, like
if
distorted
it's
electric.
loud,
It's like,
distorted, yeah,
yeah.
then it's gonna sound, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, you'd have to be pretty good to like get that across, having those kinds of
I mean, you could
characteristics, but it
sort of,
also could be relative
you,
to other music that the person is producing, and then you hear the relative emotion, even though out of context, maybe it wouldn't be taken that way,
Mhm.
potentially.
Yeah. It-
Yeah, there's another like really mysterious part of it where there's also like a sense of triumphant that you hear in music, like when it shifts from minor to major, like it's like you've achieved something momentous. Like that is really mysterious to me
yeah.
because that doesn't seem to relate to vocal effort or distortion or anything like that, which would be a valid cue of physiological arousal. That's just purely in the tones and the change from minor to major, and that. I have no idea what's going
Right.
on. Do you have any idea what's going on there?
I mean, I think that positive, negative, and minor, major have to do with positive and negative emotions in the voice again. And so when you're extremely happy, then you don't have those nonlinear features to the same extent than when you are. I mean, you do a little bit though. So people have done things like look at when people win in sports and other things, and they're definitely
Yeah,
high arousal. So some of those nonlinear features are there just by as a byproduct of the production,
yeah.
but you don't emphasize them in the same way as if you're growling at somebody or you are threatening them or whatever. Um, so the triumphant positive notes are going to be cleaner, right? And then more
Mm,
negative of of songs or melodies are going to be more distorted and have different kinds of melodic structure that's associated with that negative emotion. But I guess I would want to see the evidence for the triumphant thing. I would assume it'd be a little more clean. You have like horns or whatever, and
yeah.
it's like growling.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is
So it could
there
be. I mean,
I mean,
if there's certain traditions that are positive, where it's a positive, triumphant kind of thing, and it's big sounds with like noisy features.
so here's a different, perhaps weirder question. If you rewound the tape of Evolution, um, and you replayed it, could it be possible that minor actually would connote happiness and major would connote sadness? Like, is this just an evolutionary accident? Is it arbitrary that these emotions are mapped to these melodies and sound structures, or is there something inherent to these sound structures that connects to a particular emotion?
Right. I mean, that's a good question. And I think the evidence that I like, this is Dale Purves and Dan Bowling and others have done a lot of work looking at how musical features are related to vocal communication. And it's a very voice-centric approach to music that I like. And their argument is that when you are producing emotions vocally, like sadness or anger, that there are the relative frequencies end up mapping better to something like a dissonant musical key than in when you're have a positive vocal emotions, then those frequencies map better to a major key. So the idea there is that major and minor is universal to some extent. And I think there's evidence that not everybody hears it that way. And there could be cultural evolution of musical traditions that make that small effect not so much an effect anymore. But my thinking of it is that it is derived from how these kinds of emotions manifest in the voice. And so there's really interesting work showing that if you normalize little tiny snippets of a voice, the acoustics, and then you convert the frequencies to just octaves. So you have ratios of frequencies that start at where the maximum amplitude is in the signal, which is usually a pretty low frequency. And then instead of having the x-axis be frequency, you have it just be octaves. And then you take an octave slice and if you look at that octave slice, the spectral structure, there are bumps that correspond really well to the chromatic scale. And so you
Hmm.
can, you octave is highlighted, the unison pitch is highlighted, and then a fifth is there's a bump, and then all the little notes. There's a really cool figure in this one paper where they just show exactly how the little bumps in the spectral structure of a speech snippet is related to the chromatic scale in the Western musical scale. And then they can also do that same kind of thing for musical scales. So it's not just the intervals, but the scales themselves. Actually, there's certain scales happen more often in cultural evolution than others, right? They cluster, and the way they
Hmm.
cluster is related to how the spectral features of speech map onto the chromatic scale. So to me,
Hmm.
that's really is that we are really it's a cultural elaboration of this basic perceptual sensitivity to voices, and that
Hmm.
we can cultural evolution can build so much richness and elaboration on just that basic predisposition we have perceptually to that we like to listen to voices, or we have voice selective adaptations, right? I mean, that's
Hmm.
super clear.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
People
I mean, especially the
voices.
part where like speech corresponds more to the chromatic scale than, say a major scale or a pentatonic scale or anything like that. Like jazz to me comes to mind as like really making use of the chromatic scale, making use of just like lots of tiny changes in notes and just ascending chromatically, half step by half step. And to me, intuitively, jazz sounds more conversational. It sounds like the instruments are talking. It sounds like a person,
Right.
just, like you hear people jamming, it's just like the instruments are talking to each other, and it's just sounds like I don't know, more,
It's
yeah,
super rich metaphor that
yeah,
jazz musicians like a lot. And
yeah,
I teach it that way in this one. I used to teach a class called group communication, and I would
yeah.
draw explicit connections between conversational behavior and musical interaction. And yeah, you're taking turns. I mean, there's all these elements they map really well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that we're sensitive to voices, and that's the kinds of sounds we want to hear. We've culturally evolved instruments that are in the same range, and that the way emotions are expressed are gonna, if you would analyze it correctly, you're gonna see map onto the way we express those things vocally. And so that's why we major, minor, consonance, dissonance, descending versus ascending melodic contours, they just all seem to map. But then you
Hmm.
have all these other features that cultural evolution uses to build musical traditions that then it's crazy when you think about the music variability out there, and that what basic adaptive problems that originally music solved is not going to predict all the elaboration we see that culture has produced.
Hmm.
And you just mentioned music being and solving an, or was it a cultural adaptation? I mean, what is your take? So, I mean, there's one idea that, cultural selection or biological selection made music an adaptation, the big A, the A word, the onerous concept. What is your take? So, I mean, there's one idea that, music evolved for social bonding, for example.
Yeah, I'm less
What's your
into that one.
take? What's your take on that? Yeah.
So there's a really good BBS thing that Max Krasnow and Sam and Ed Hagen and I wrote a BBS Target article about this. And then it was, I think, the only time this has happened in BBS where we submitted two Target articles. So we did one, and then another group of folks, Pat Savage and Tecumseh Fitch and a bunch of folks produced one that was about social bonding. Because we did this conference in Paris or outside of Paris many years ago where we were talking about the origins of music, and then two camps kind of happened, us four and then everybody else that
Hmm.
likes social bonding. So we decided to do this BBS thing. They took both papers and then they solicited commentaries for both. It's just huge. It's like a book.
Wow.
And there we go after the social bonding idea. And I don't want to pick on that here too much, but the idea is that because you can show effects of people playing music together, cooperate more and like each other more, and there's all these sort of proximate effects, they argue that it's for that. And we make the case it's actually not well suited for that, particularly just because it has that effect doesn't mean that the adaptation is
Right.
to cause social bonding. And we make the case rather that it's better to think of it as credible signaling. So when you have a practiced effect of a coalition producing a coherent, obviously choreographed show that takes practice. It's an honest signal of time spent with one another. It gives an honest indicator of how well you coordinate your actions. And and so then and the idea is that that could have caused selection for the ability to entrain physically with another person, which is a human specific adaptation. Almost no other mammal can really do it well, where you can actually readily learn how to entrain to another person with their motor abilities. That's something that only people can do. And so if you're going to look for a musical adaptation, I think you got to look for why would people be coordinating their muscle movement like that
Mm.
in a super fine-grained way. So that's the argument that Ed and I had developed a long time ago. That's my first paper ever published, arguing that you're giving an honest signal of coalition quality by coordinating and music is a vehicle to do that. And then Sam and Max had sort of developed this idea about how infant caregiver communicate or caregivers signaling to infants that they are actually honestly have their attention, and that promoted this motivation to produce melodies that got the infant's attention. And then it's hard to do that while doing other things. If you're singing to your kid, you could be doing some other things, but you definitely they have your attention.
Mm.
And so that's an emotional communication mechanism that is sort of exploiting the predisposition for detecting emotions in voices, right? Some lullabies sound like friendly, affiliative kinds of vocalizations, but they're just, um, ritualized, highly ritualized. And so their argument was that that could be the origins of melody, is that initial singing between for caregivers singing to their offspring. So we just make the case that these are two examples of credible signaling that could form the basis for some adaptations that are actually for music. But then most other things that we incorporate into the music faculty, as they say, are byproducts of other things that we have. So that's my view is that there are a couple adaptations plus cheesecake,
Mm.
right? And Pinker's idea of vibratory cheesecake is sort of the hypothesis to beat, in that it's culturally cobbled together all these mechanisms that really have solved all these other problems. And language is also plausibly a lot like that. Like, what specific adaptation is there for language? That's a big question. I mean, now it's getting reduced down to recursion is the only thing. I mean, even that's questionable. Language is a whole nother animal.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's an analogous sort of argument there that we're cobbling together all these abilities and culturally, but then there could be these core adaptive problems that should be considered proper in the domain of music and not
Mm.
actual.
And those sound like they're getting into time because, music is because the emotionality thing, there was no, I mean, there was a little bit of a time component, but there is, of course, this whole thing of like rhythm or prosody. And just in the, somebody can't be a good musician if they don't have good rhythm or they don't have a good sense of timing, even if they
Right,
can, if they're like, yeah, this pitch is going to make you feel like this, if they can't do that over time, they're not going to be a good musician.
right.
Is so, but it sounds like dancing or like coordinating movement is an example. So is that correct that maybe these other proper domainy things of coordination and possibly this byproduct of melody is part of where timing comes in?
Yeah, well, I mean, the timing is we humans are really even the people with the worst timing are pretty good relative to
Compared to
other
other
animals,
species.
right?
Okay, yeah,
Definitely. You cannot train a dog to play a drum, no matter how many
yeah.
treats.
Believe me, I've
They
tried, Greg
can't do it.
says, yeah.
Right. I mean, people have evidence for bonobos, which I mean, you don't see a bonobo in the wild doing anything remotely like that, but you
Mm,
can get them to kind of, keep a beat along with the thing that they hear. I don't think they've ever shown a bonobo being able to keep a beat without something to listen to.
yeah.
Um, there's evidence that sea lions can bob their head to a beat, but it takes a lot of training. And and then birds can do it. So there's the famous snowball, the cockatoo, who dances. And
Hmm.
cockatoos are well known to dance. And so all these animals are vocal. Sea lions are the exception, which is an interesting one. But all these animals are vocal learners. So any animal that needs to pay attention to the periodic features of some other vocalizer and then being able to make the same sound, and you have to learn how to do it. It's not something that's just genetically endowed. You actually have to experience the thing to produce it. Animals that do that can then keep a beat to some exogenous stimulus
Mm.
and then have the perception action coupling ability to then move their muscles to the thing that they hear. But there's very few animals that actually have that ability. Sea lions are interesting because they are not vocal learners, but they are in their clade, there are vocal learners. So there's a latent ability in there that's not expressed in that species, but the ability is clearly there. And then other related animals can do it, are vocal learners. So um,
Hmm.
I think the
Well, I
evidence is
mean,
pretty good that vocal learning is important for entrainment. And so anybody, any human is at least is kind of an expert in that sense. But then to be really good at rhythm is then you're tapping into like the best
Mm.
people
Right. Or maybe
on
the
that
emotional expression of
dimension.
the timing of David, I know you're gonna say, is there any evidence of emotion and music linkage? So like are really good musicians better at linking emotions and sound or emotions in general?
Yes, yes. So trained musicians are better at identifying emotion categories in music and in voices.
that's
Not
cool.
much, but there is an effect for
Mm.
sure.
Cool.
But then trained musicians are better than a lot of things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's
Right.
so many variables. Like when you're a trained musician, that's a pretty privileged situation.
Sure.
So you probably have a lot of advantages.
Yeah.
And also, people, you learn music, just learning music enhances other cognitive abilities. It's sort of like exercises for the brain. And so, if you're doing music, that's good for your brain. And it activates all areas of the brain. Music triggers, unlike most other things.
Hmm. Interesting. Uh, why do I remember so vividly and connect so deeply with the music I heard during my teen years, maybe early 20s? Like, I feel like everyone has that experience where they really connect with music at that age.
Yeah.
And like all their favorite stuff comes from that era. Like, my dad still listens to the Beatles, like he's listened to that growing up, and like all those old bands from the 60s. Like, there's a strong age
Yeah,
effect there.
huge.
How do you have any
Right.
sense of why that is?
Yeah. I mean, I think it fits really well into the coalition signaling argument because
Okay.
think of music as cultural capital. You're learning the music of your culture.
Hmm.
You have to learn the songs, you have to learn the scale, the musical system, right? And you learn that like language. So as soon as you learn the musical system of your music, then you start being unable to make distinctions in other systems. And so you can't, like Western music listeners can't hear that the sitar is out of tune, for example. Um, there's kind of the famous story of Ravi Shankar tuning up his sitar for an audience, and he finished tuning, everybody clapped, and George mortified, and then he said something like, "Well, if you like that, I hope you really like the songs." So we are like language. We close ourselves off to other languages once we learn the distinctions that are important in our language. So think of that as like the musical capital that you've learned. I like the capital idea, and so during puberty, there's, I think, like an imprinting process where a lot of cultural phenomena, including whatever it is happens to be in your culture. In our case, it's like TV shows and music and movies and sayings and accents or
Yeah,
whatever.
and
I think
clothes. Yeah, yeah.
at puberty a little bit, and then or memory systems are there. I think there's probably could be adaptations there that are sort of imprinting those memories. So you remember the lyrics, you remember the songs in ways that you don't remember things later. And it's not just because you're getting old and you can't remember. It's there's something specific about that pubertal time. And so I think it's in an ancestral environment, that's just the way that you adopt the culture that you're from, and then you can honestly signal you're from it. Because if you come in as an outsider, as an adult, you won't have that effect. And so it would be easy to detect that you're an outsider. And similar to like Dave's work on accents, right? There's a certain thing about you learn accents, and it's hard to actually go into a group and pretend you're from there and have the accent. Like I don't think I could ever go to some village in England and pretend that no matter how long I lived there, they would always know I was not one of them. And so I think music's the same way, and that's the effect you're describing is basically that process of encoding the musical culture that you grew up in.
Hmm.
And so most people are like, music stopped being good after that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I predict like when people think music started sucking is like when they were 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Has there
I
been
mean,
work on that? Has there been
I think
work
I'm an
on?
exception. I'm always looking for new music, but the
Yeah.
what?
Has there been empirical work on that?
Very little actually.
Hmm.
There was um I shouldn't say that. I was going to talk about an EHB paper. It didn't make it, but yeah, not enough work on that. I've always been fascinated with that idea, and it's in some ways, some aspects of that are quite tractable. I mean, you just ask people about what
Yeah.
music they like,
Yeah.
how old they are. That showing the tendency would be easy.
Yeah.
If you didn't show it, you've fucked up. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah. It's in
clear
The
as that.
Simpsons. So Homer Simpson, there's a classic quote from the 90s Simpsons that rock achieved perfection in 1974, right? Like when they're listening to music in the car. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then I think what is a more difficult thing is to try to measure how that might impact other aspects of your judgment about other individuals and other social effects. And I don't know. But yeah, that's a really interesting and super robust effect, in my opinion. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally. I have a weird thing where I'm thinking I'm echoing again. Jeez. I have a weird thing where, in addition to remembering the songs of that era very vividly, I have a really vivid memory of all the different film scores from that time in my life. If you just name one movie from like the late 90s, early 2000s, I'll be able to like tell you hum the film score to it. Like even
Uh-huh.
like Speed, I remember the melody from Speed, like from
Wow.
Keanu Reeves. Like,
Hmm.
so it's a weird thing. I don't know if that's a common thing, but like I have a really good memory for film scores, particularly from that time of my life, even if I saw the movie
Yeah.
like maybe once or twice. Like, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously pretty into film, right? So then that's an
yeah,
attractor for you, right?
yeah,
And then that example is interesting. So I'm older than you, and so that is not a period that I
yeah,
know. Right? I
yeah,
wasn't watching as many movies back then, and I certainly could not. I've seen
yeah.
Speed maybe twice. No, I don't know, that's not true. But there's no way I couldn't even identify it in a forced choice, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's funny.
yeah,
I could talk about music the whole time, but I know there's a lot of things that you've studied in the acoustic modality that people are either sensitive to, that maybe surprising for people. Um, are there ones that you think are cool or exciting? I mean, they're all cool and exciting, but are there particular ones that either you've done in the past or that you're working on now
You
that
mean
are
areas of research or topics or
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, things you're doing or colleagues, but yeah,
yeah.
I mean, because I don't want to have people just leave with the impression that you're doing just music.
That's
Uh,
probably
yeah,
the thing I've done the least empirical work. That's all
yeah,
mostly
exactly. So,
theoretical.
so yeah.
I do have some. I have a couple papers on music perception stuff,
Yeah,
but
yeah. And I think it's
it's,
fascinating, but I do want to like, I want to be able to talk a little bit about what else you've
yeah,
done empirically. So can you give us, I don't
yeah.
know what the best, like, is there a story of like, have you come around to like, this is the thing I'm focusing on? Or is it just that there's like this, you're a kid in a candy shop, there's so much to do. You have the lucky position of being an acoustic adaptationist and you're like, we're going to do this and this and this and this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I came into the whole thing interested in how people use their voice to convey emotions, and then and through music. So what are the musical properties of speech is kind of a thing to think about. And so I got interested in prosody. That's sort of the interface between language and music. So prosody is this pitch and loudness and rhythm and some spectral features that are acting on top of utterances that give you information that's beyond what's in the language. And I think it's a super powerful mechanism. I mean, you can interpret a lot from prosody without hearing any of the words. You can content mask speech, and people are really good at identifying all sorts of rich dimensions about the speech signal just based on the melody. So that's what originally drew me into this whole area of research. And then Lita's paper that I mentioned before was, focusing on that, looking at how there's these certain invariances in acoustic structure across different emotions that are not about the language. And in 1983, that was kind of a novel idea, kind of. And so, so I got into that. And then I started studying spontaneous speech. When I got my PhD, it's in cognitive psychology, and psycholinguistics was the emphasis in the program. One of the big things. And so I started working with my advisor, Jeannie Foxtree, who studies spontaneous speech, not from an evolutionary perspective. That was an issue, actually. But so we kind of settled on this topic of verbal irony and the idea of whether when people produce verbal irony spontaneously, like sarcasm, are they doing some particular thing with their voice to express that indirect meaning, or is it an illusion? Which she thought it might be an illusion because she studied what syntactic disambiguation. So people think that when you have a syntactically ambiguous utterance, then when you say it one way versus another in context, people think they say it differently. But if you look at they don't. And so if I say a man eating fish, and people are like, and then you might think of a man eating a fish, or you might think of a shark, right? And people assume that you say it differently when it's one thing versus another. But if you look, they don't really. And so we kind of hear something that's not really there. So she thought this was true for sarcasm. I didn't. I thought sarcasm actually did have some special thing that was helping people understand that it was sarcasm. And it turned out we were kind of both right. It's less than you think. It's pretty ambiguous, but there are certain things that people do when they're speaking ironically that are, I think, helping listeners understand it. So people slow down, for example. That's the most robust effect, is a speed change. And so when I was studying irony, and that was sort of the way I could get into experimentally looking at the effect of prosody on people's language processing, but then I noticed people were laughing a lot, and that was a signal. And so then that got me going into like, well, where's laughter coming from? And then there was some existing literature on laughter as a play vocalization, which I was like, yes, that is it right there. And that's now still, I'm doing a lot of work like that, looking at laughter as a play vocalization in non-human animals, including. But that's how I got into laughter, is from this irony stuff. And then I realized laughter is this really understudied and super tractable vocalization that gives you a window into the evolution of vocal communication. That's really nice because it's homologous across all mammals, but it's incorporated into our linguistic, into speech. And then it also is a good example of a vocalization that is produced by the vocal emotion system, which is a separate evolutionarily conserved system that is used to produce crying, laughs, pain shrieks, copulation calls. And then there's the speech system, which is a different control system for articulators in the larynx and the mouth for speech. And it's a different system, and only one can actually control the vocal apparatus at a time. So that's why crying children and laughing people can't talk, right? Because that system is hijacking vocal production mechanism. And so the speech system can't get in there. And that's why when you're talking and you're laughing while you're talking, then you're giving evidence that you're laughing from the volitional system, because it's actually happening with speech. Otherwise, if you're really laughing, you have to stop talking. So laughter is this really beautiful vocalization to study by looking at how these two systems interact. When we're unique in all animals for having two vocal production systems like that. This volitional system is super important for language and speech. And then turns out that I think one of the targets of selection for that volitional system is emulating the production of the vocal emotion system. So we do fake laughs, fake cries, fake orgasms, fake pain shrieks, or whatever.
Mm.
And then that creates this whole extra level of dynamics. If you're thinking about like game theoretically, like how you're going to, understand the equilibria that emerge in communication systems. When now we have this added level of volitional control that just makes it way more complicated. So
Mm.
you could potentially be faking almost anything.
Interesting.
Um, so laughter is a totally cool vocalization to study for that reason. And now I'm studying, I've been getting more into bioacoustics. So my grad student um, is the director of a gibbon conservation center in Santa Clarita. And so she's got 40 gibbons. And so I've been getting into gibbon. And gibbons are interesting because they do a lot of duetting. So they do territorial um, um, displays, a mating pair, duets, and they give information that this is our territory, and you can get you can glean like how long they've been together, and there's aspects of their duetting that give you important information about the ecology. And they produce these other the crazy vocalizations, these gibbons. And then I have a postdoc who is studying dog play vocalizations, and this is more connected to laughter where we're looking at dogs, and we just went and did some foxes last week. There's some Russian domesticated foxes down in San Diego. So I've been getting more into this non-human animal vocalizations and trying to connect those to things that we think might be true for human laughter and showing that, for example, domestication in play vocalizations in canids could be informative regarding the domestication of the play vocalizations in humans. And as a domesticated species, we've now a lot of our vocal behavior has changed, in part because we have this new speech system that allows us all this flexibility. And so laughter is just seems to always pop up, and
Mm.
it's fun too.
Yeah, no, that's super cool stuff. Um, do you have any ideas about, I mean, I have ideas about why laughter is contagious and why hearing laughter makes you reciprocate it and why you laugh and I laugh and you laugh and I laugh and it's almost this kind of duet. I have ideas on that. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard, I know the theory, which I think
Yeah.
is overlaps hugely with encryption.
Yeah.
And that's always been my approach is that laughter is a signal of decryption, essentially. And then so you're
Hmm.
giving a covert signal of I have the information that you're referring
Hmm.
to
Mm.
explicitly stated. I know
Hmm.
your thing is about mix-ups in
Yeah.
particular, which we've talked about this a bit. We'll probably can talk about it more. I mean,
Yeah.
you might say mix-ups to the superordinate category, and I'd say encryption is. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
we could go
Mm.
back, but those are highly compatible ideas.
Yeah.
So we're definitely on the same wavelength on that one. But yeah, so
Yeah.
laughter, I think, often functions as a way to signal to others that you have information without explicitly stating it.
Yeah.
I also think that there's good evidence that co-laughter between multiple individuals can form a chorus signal that alert outsiders or give, not alert necessarily, maybe sometimes, but more like inform outsiders about the coalition strength of the people laughing. Like you can detect how well, for one, I have empirical evidence that cross-culturally you can detect how if people are friends or strangers in 1 second of co-laughter. And it doesn't work like that with speech exactly. And so but I think that there could be some exaggerated features of laughter can be explained as being a signal for wide broadcast and giving information about coalition strength. That's beyond just friends or strangers, but you can actually get pretty rich information about the constitution of a group by just paying attention for a minute on who's laughing and how loud. And so I
Yeah.
think laughter is doing stuff that's outside of the immediate group that the laughter is occurring within.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, my thinking on the topic is that if we mix up our meanings of a phrase, like for instance, you're confused about whether hook up with means meet up with or have sex with, and you say you hooked up with my mother, right? If so, that would be a pretty costly
Funny.
mix
Yeah.
up, if you mix up those two meanings of hook up with, and we need some way of diffusing the costs of that mix up, so there's no grudge, it doesn't damage our relationship, and we not only need to diffuse those costs, we need to create common knowledge of the fact that those costs have been diffused. Like,
Right.
I need to know that you know that I know that there was a mix-up and we're not taking it seriously as actual communication, right? And I think
Right.
that is part of the function of laughter and why laughter is contagious. You want
Sure.
to reciprocate the laughter to create common knowledge, such that I send you the message and you send me receipt of the message and I send you receipt of your receipt of the message, and so on. It's sort of like, Steven Pinker talks about this in his new book, sort of like linking to electronic devices, or like, pairing two devices with the Bluetooth. Often they will send a message, and then the recipient system will send a receipt of the message, and then the other system will send a receipt of the of the receipt, and so on and on until they establish
Right.
a connection. And I think laughter is pretty similar, and it's a way of creating common knowledge and sort of ascending the almost infinite recursion of thoughts about thoughts about thoughts, right? So I think
Right.
that's what's going on with contagious laughter, and why we feel the need to reciprocate it. Um, and yeah, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
I
Number
like that
one,
idea.
whether cool. Yeah, I just put out the preprint. Maybe I'll send it to you when we're done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. You've been sitting on that for a while, huh?
Yeah, I've been sitting on that for finally finished the damn preprint.
Nice.
Yeah, I had to work through all the math was really a pain in the ass. So that took me a while to really finalize that. But yeah, I'm curious. Number one, if you find that idea plausible, and number two, I'm really curious about this distinction between fake and real laughter, and whether you think
Yeah.
there's some kind of evolutionary arms race between fake
Yes.
laughers and fake laughter detectors.
Yep.
If that's behind this, and whether that applies to other kinds of vocal signals as well.
Yeah, I think that applies to all vocal signals in the sense that are um, produced by both systems, right? Which
Yeah.
is constrained by what the vocal emotion system produces, which is only nonverbal vocalizations. So yeah, I think it's the Athena activists and I have a paper that kind of started this spontaneous volitional laughter idea, and we talk about the arms race, and that clearly there is going to be selection to detect whether people are producing something volitionally, that gives you information about what their potential intentions are. Now, how I think a lot of times volitional laughter is also just polite laughter that functions in a conversation and is like a conversational marker. So it's not deceptive. It's not always going to be deceptive when I volitionally laugh. I can give like a little signal that I understand you, sort of like what the function would be for a real laugh, but I'm not emotionally triggered to do it. Instead, I just do it as a signal that is not honest in the same way, but I mean, um, then you could talk about the honesty there is that I think a complicated issue, but so it's not always a manipulative thing when we produce a volitional version of something that the vocal motion system does. Um, but I'm trying, what was the first thing that
Whether you
about,
buy the
oh, I was
idea
going to
that
say,
we're diffusing the costs of like either a
yeah, yeah,
miscommunication or a faux pas or
right.
something like that, and signaling that,
I like that.
basically co-opting the play signal to signal that, we're not taking this seriously, just as the play signal often communicates, this is not real aggression. I'm not actually chasing you or trying to hurt you. This is just pretend. I think that evolution co-opted the play signal when we are mixed up with one another, or when we have a miscommunication, to signal that we're not mad at each other. This isn't,
Yes.
we're not treating this as real communication. We're sort of treating it as a play interaction instead.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's right. And so the mix-up thing, I think, is totally consistent with that. But
Yeah.
I also think there are other reasons we laugh that have to do with social cohesion. So
Yeah.
if you're with an old friend, you're not really signaling about mix-ups anymore, right? If it's somebody I've known for 40 years, I think that even though it might be derived from that at some level, and you might be able to make an argument that it's sort of like, why do people laugh when they're by themselves? It's not obviously a different function. It's as if there's another person there. So
Yeah.
laughing with an old friend could be as if there's a mix-up that we don't have. But I think
Uh-huh.
it could also be that there's sort of endogenous reward when you're laughing together. So there is a social bonding effect that can happen. And so you might, I think about like jokes between familiar people. The mix-up angle. I'm going to think of some good examples for you
Yeah.
though, and see how you answer them. I don't have
Okay.
them offhand, but I think there are examples of times when people are laughing a lot, very motivated to laugh, and there's not a mix-up.
Hmm.
But I have to think of some good ones because
Okay.
I know what you'll be able to figure out the mix-up if you dig deep enough. Which is a
Yeah.
good thing about the theory.
Yeah.
Um, But I think there's other things about just mutually recognizing preferences, or in some cases, like you might be critical of something that you both know. I know your view and you know my view, and we each know that we know that. And so there's no need to signal that exactly anymore. But there's still like that has a pleasurable element to it that causes us to still engage in the signaling system. And so it could be that it came from a mix-up and now it's taken on this other kind of function, which also could be a motivating proximate mechanism for generating a signal that other people can hear that gives information about our coalition status. So I guess
Yeah.
that's consistent with your idea that it's not just about those people figuring out a mix-up, but and like I mentioned before, it could be about signaling something to other people outside of the group, which is why it's so loud, right? Laughter is really ridiculously loud for what it should be doing. A
Yeah.
better covert signal for the mix-up would be much quieter, like a play vocalization in most non-human animals. They're very quiet. They're not
Mm.
broadcasting that they're playing to everybody. They're
Yeah.
only, and this is why they're hard to measure because you got to really get in there to record it, and it's hard to tell who produces it because they're barely, and they're barely moving your mouth, and so these are they're conspiratorial whispers, if you want to put it in the Krebs and Dawkins sort of language.
Yeah.
Play vocalizations are, but human laughter and some other species, only a few, are loud.
Yeah.
So that suggests another function that's beyond the dyadic
Yeah.
interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
the
I
way
would just say there's other reasons we laugh, but I like the mix-up idea explains a lot, I think.
yeah, that makes sense. And if you come up with any stumpers, I'm happy to hear them. Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Uh, yeah,
Working on
please,
it.
please do.
Good.
Yeah, no,
Science in action. Science in
yeah,
action. Yeah.
yeah, no, my thinking with the loudness is that we coordinate and cooperate in much larger groups, and if we're suffering a mix-up, the people who are mixed up not only need to know it, but all of their friends and associates and anyone who's
That's
nearby
good.
would benefit from knowing it as well because we coordinate as a group. Our social conventions are community wide and not a function of two or three people. We share the same language as a community, and if there's a miscommunication, like we're all part playing that coordination game together of which sounds correspond to which things in the world. And insofar
Yeah,
as there's a mix up between two people about which sounds correspond to which things, then the entire linguistic community has an interest in becoming aware of that
totally.
and avoiding that kind of miscommunication as well. So that would be my speculation for why
Yeah, I
the
like you should
laughter
check
is
out
loud.
there's Tom Flamson has
Yeah.
the empirical part of, well, there's the first encryption paper, which was Tom and Clark did that had some experiments about how much prior knowledge do you have and how that affects humor or whatever, supporting the encryption idea. But then Tom has other cross-cultural data from the people he was working with in Brazil, who's the name of the group, I can't remember. And he has these examples. I mean, communities, the whole village is meeting, and then people make these certain kinds of jokes that then cause people to laugh. And he was analyzing like who was laughing at what and how that
Yeah.
related to their social network. And I don't know if you've seen that paper, but I think that would be useful for you to talk. I mean, I think your theory would fit well with that.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
So
the other idea I had for why laughter varies in volume and why it might be louder in some contexts is if there's a larger cost to be diffused, you want to be much more certain that that cost has been diffused. And so you want to laugh louder and longer to really make sure that we both know that the other one
nice.
knows that the other one knows that you
Yeah.
actually didn't sleep with my mother, for example. So the costlier the mix up is, the louder and longer we should laugh to really make sure that those costs
Uh-huh.
have been
So hooking
diffused.
up with the guys at Taco Bell is not as bad as hooking up with your mother. I understand.
Yeah,
Right?
I think it's
That's
evolved
I
from
know
Taco
that's your
Bell to my
example
mother.
that you like.
Yeah, exactly.
He's workshopping he's
Yeah,
workshopping the
I've been
bit for
developing
that.
my
Yeah, it's
material, yeah,
workshop.
through trial and error.
Exactly.
I mean, that seems like a pretty testable prediction right there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be a cool way to
As long as
test it.
you work out, have a good convincing argument about what the costs are, which seems like a hard problem.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
seems like
it's
intuitive.
brilliant.
It fits my personal experience and a lot of like anecdotes of like people when people really give a big belly laugh, it's usually at like kind of like a dark joke or like a really like spicy like costly
Mhm.
mix up that it seems intuitively right to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the idea is similar to encryption in multiple ways, but one way is that people will have examples that at first pass seems to violate the thing, and then you can
Mhm.
come up with actually that's encryption. and then you can show how it's encryption. It's not obvious immediately how it's
Yeah.
encryption or how it's a mix-up. And
Yeah.
so I think something to work out there is like, what is the difference? Like, are there encryptions that aren't mix-ups, and are that, but there's no mix-ups that aren't encryption,
Um, yeah, yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, there are no mix-ups that aren't encryption in some sense, and that you need to be privy to the coordination game being played in order to understand that there has been a mix-up, right? You need to
right?
speak that language. You need to be in that culture to know what was mixed up with what. And if you're not a member of that culture, you won't know. So
Right.
yeah, I guess in that sense, all mix-ups are encryption are encrypted, among the people who are insiders to that culture. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
Would one, let me just push on that though, and I'm the
yeah,
bystander here. If somebody is like imagining like a new culture and they don't know, and I'm just imagining like this trope of like some Westerner comes to like this very like belligerent culture where like they might kill the person, and they're like the Westerner is sort of like says something which is inappropriate to the context, like, oh, nice weather we're having, and kind of laugh. It's sort of a signal of like, I hope we're on the same page. But they were laughing as sort of a gauge. I mean, maybe that's a claim of like they're trying to probe for encryption, or that
Right.
like that's a affiliative. Don't we have some common understanding? Some, I don't know. Maybe that's a bad.
No, I mean, I
Yeah,
think that that fits within David's idea for sure, and it's
yeah,
an encryption thing that you're trying to exploit their understanding of the signal, even if the con they we have mutual knowledge that the con we don't have the common ground
yeah,
to for the language to handle it, but then I'm signaling as if we do
yeah,
as a good thing. Like I'm trying,
yeah,
and now it
yeah, yeah,
sounded like being insincere in your laugh. If you had a bad fake laugh, that might be costly, right? If you say something inappropriate and you're like, ah, or whatever, then that might be worse than
yeah,
not producing a laugh. So you better make it a good one.
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. The more I think about humor and laughter, the more I realize just like how unfathomably complicated it is. Like every joke is
Totally.
just like you could write a whole book dissecting why it's funny. It's
And they do.
yeah, yeah, and just like the, I
If
know
you've
it's true.
dove into the humor literature, I'm sure you have. It's
Oh, I'm
like,
sure. Yeah, but even
whew.
even beyond the funniness, there are like really complicated game theoretic constraints about like the incentives of different actors in the social network and whether they should laugh or whether they shouldn't or whether how loudly they should laugh or like what their interests are in terms of whether they want those costs to be diffused or not, whether they should try to fake laughing if they don't get the joke, like really complicated considerations that I feel like,
Right, with cost for
yeah,
whatever decision you make, and then
yeah,
it opens up a whole window of cost and benefits that hard to go back on.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the volitional laughter adds I mean, volitional production of anything really adds so much complication there for sure.
yeah.
And there was something else I was going to say about the laughter signaling, and I forgot, but
Yeah,
it'll
I'll
come
give
back.
you a second because I just can't imagine. I'm the humor literature, I imagine, has no jokes in it whatsoever. Like this, I imagine
The
like
jokes are
books
so
are
bad.
written. I
I find it
imagine that,
really, yeah,
yeah, I'm
yeah.
sure, like, I imagine like there's an entire book on humor, like the book, the blurbs in the back, like, I didn't laugh once, right? Like something like
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I'm
killing
trying to
humor,
solve that problem. My
one
my
chapter at a
preprint
time.
oh,
has
it's
some
funny.
genuinely
Oh,
funny
good.
jokes.
Oh,
At
great.
least according to me. Well, it has like all the movies that I grew up with, all the comedies like
Yeah.
Dumb and Dumber and stuff like that. Seinfeld jokes. So I like to think that the humor in there is funnier than the average
And then,
humor
David, what
preprint.
you can do is you can be a testimonial. You can say, "This is scientifically funny." If you can become that, you're the
Yeah.
you're the official
If you don't
science.
recognize this, you are,
Yeah,
technically have a bad sense of humor.
exactly. Yes, this is empirically funny. Yes,
Wonderful way to abuse my scientific credibility.
exactly. Yes. Hey, if you
Actually,
can't
that dad
abuse your
joke was
science,
funny.
yeah,
You're actually mistaken.
exactly,
I,
Well, and that's the thing about both of these ideas, the mix up and the encryption, is that it explains why jokes are not universally funny, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's all context dependent because
yeah,
it depends what we're talking about and what the rules are, um, and so yeah, no other theory of humor really has been able to point at that quite a bit. There are a lot of theories of humor out there that approximate and
yeah,
capture some subgroup of jokes, and it's also the emphasis on jokes
Yeah.
I think it's been they've gone too far. The people that study
Hmm.
humor
Mm.
are thinking about the joke as sort of a proto humor. That's not the way. I mean, I think most people that study humor would realize it emerged first in conversational interactions that are context specific, and that the
Yeah.
joke is a trope. But it seems like there's way more like punchlines and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah.
Comic timing too is a super rich,
Hmm.
yeah, fascinating. I'm sure there's tons of like things you could do with that. I doubt, people have done a fraction of the experiments and studies that you could do
Yeah.
studying comic timing. But like,
I
yeah, I mean,
mean, I think it were. Oh, let's go ahead. I
my,
was going
my
to
thinking
say
about it
the
is
res
just like micro mix-ups. Like we have these conventions with like, the timing of our speech, the speed, how much we pause, vocal intonation. We just talked about, how, your tone of voice communicates so much. I mean, you could have mix-ups there. Like if I, exaggerate my voice into kind of overly sing-songy way, like that can be kind of funny. I'm like kind of mixed up about what the conventions are about how much I should change my tone of voice, or if I speak too loudly or too slowly, or if I pause in an awkward way. Like I think these kinds of considerations factor into what we call comic timing, as it's layering in micro mix-ups about the pacing and body language and intonation of the delivery of the joke on top of the content of the joke itself, which accentuates the comedy of it.
and it's really the resolution of the timing is incredible. I mean, if you just wait an extra 100 milliseconds, it matters. And so
Yeah.
I've done some work looking at how timing can affect pragmatic inferences in quick
Hmm.
interactions of just answering questions. And if you wait just a little extra in how you answer a question, it has all these implications for what kinds of implicatures you're communicating, what kinds of things the listener might draw from it. I use an example in my class of if you say just in a normal greeting, like, "Hey, how you doing?" And so if like, ask me how I'm doing.
How you doing?
Good. Now ask again.
How you doing?
Good. And then ask again.
How are you doing?
Good. Right? So that seemed to be kind of a normal. If you go too fast, there's much different inferences you draw than, and if I wait too long,
Yeah.
then there's a complete, and the difference between those is like maybe was a 200 milliseconds, a fifth of a second.
Yeah.
And so
It,
I think
it
that basic principle of timing and pragmatics is then a particular feature in comic timing that's important.
totally. And if you're just a little bit off of what the social convention is, it can be very funny. Like, ask me how I'm doing.
How you
Good.
doing?
And I just
See, that was
left.
funny. Like I didn't even wait for you to. So yeah, yeah. There's
I
so
like
much
it.
there.
Yeah.
I also have another pitch for you to work on it, differentiating a hostile or evil laugh from a friendly or
Right?
convivial laugh. I
Mm.
feel like that could be
Yeah.
really interesting to look at. I mean, my thinking about why laughter can sometimes be hostile or creepy is that mirth or amusement evolved to diffuse the costs of mix-ups, and in order to do that, it needs to deactivate regions of the brain that process costs. So deactivate negative emotions. So the same thing goes with if you're playing. If you're having rough and tumble play, you want to deactivate your fear, so you're not actually afraid, for your life. If you want to deactivate your anger, so you're not like vengeful and retaliating against the person who's play fighting with you. But in the same way, if we're trying to diffuse the costs of mix-ups, we want to deactivate those negative emotions, deactivate fear, anger, sadness, whatever. And the problem is, though, as soon as you have that machinery in place, that makes you very threatening to people who are not sharing your mirth. So if I'm
Right.
laughing and mirthful, that means that my fear has been deactivated, and I could just attack you without fear of retaliation. It, and my empathy might even be deactivated. If you're crying in pain or sad about something, like I'm not going to feel empathy for you because I'm laughing. I'm mirthful. It's my those
Right.
parts of my brain have been
Confirmed.
deactivated. So for that reason, I think mirth can often signal that I have a lack of fear and that I have a lack of empathy for your suffering, and that makes me really dangerous. Um, and so I would be interested in maybe evil laughter having a different signature, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe we just
So I have
infer evil laughter. Yeah.
my most recent paper on laughter, it looks at this
Yeah.
issue, among other things, but looking at whether people can distinguish between different laugh types that we've had people produce. So we
Yeah.
create contexts where, malicious laughter and co-amusement and
Yeah.
sarcastic and all these different things. And it turns out that it's really the dimensional view of emotion is the best way to predict it, and in
Yeah.
particular valence. So it seems that laugh does work on the dimension of valence, so you can
Yeah.
tell positive and negative, but we mix up positive categories at a high rate, and we mix up negative categories at a high rate, and also with the machine learning algorithm does the same kind of mix-ups. And so we can
Yeah.
see what the acoustic features are that are associated with these different laugh types, and then how those acoustic features predict its valence almost completely. A little bit of arousal too. So the idea of a malicious laugh, like the whatever, is really a kind of a cultural invention that doesn't exist in ordinary discourse usually.
Mm.
But I think what you're saying is right in that a context where you're laughing and you know the other person's not laughing and they know
Yeah.
that you know they're not laughing, and then
Mm.
you might hike up a little more negative sort of energy in there to make it sound a little darker, because laughter can be very intimidating in certain
Yeah.
contexts. It's not always positive,
Mhm.
Yeah.
obviously. And so, in fact, it could be linked to any emotion.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I agree that there could be situations like what you described where the laughter is really communicating something about your lack of empathy or your lack of concern for the other, and it's not about correcting a mistake.
Yeah.
Um, Same way. And
Yeah.
but there's no categorical evil laugh.
Yeah.
Um, I think I mean, other than in movies that are try.
Mwahaha.
You have to
Yeah.
practice your evil cackle.
Yeah,
Is
nobody does that seriously, right? If you hear
Yeah.
that, they're doing the trope. Yeah,
Hmm. Interesting.
but I'm sure it plays on, like this, like I think it's what you're both were saying is like, I mean, a trope would be like you're a kid getting picked on, and the kids who are picking on you are laughing, right? It's exactly what David's saying. I mean, that's the proper domain of this trope, right? Yeah, it's not
yeah,
that that
yes,
laughter is the cackle, but it feels like it, and then
yeah,
the trope, the cackle sort of plays on that, yeah, elaborates.
yeah. I mean, I wonder how universal it is. It probably would be recognized pretty widely. I mean, I imagine I always do the Schwarr test because I've been there and I can imagine how they'd react. And it's like, what would a Schwarr person, how would they react to like a prototypical malicious laugh like from the movies? And would they understand in a forced choice, is this happy or is this bad? Well, it is happy in a way. That's part of the that's
Yeah,
part of the
Yeah.
yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
They're happy that it's bad for you.
Yeah. They're like, why
Right.
does everybody in your culture monologue when they're and tell the protagonist what they're about to do so that they can foil the villain?
Yeah.
You
But
know, I
so
would love
maybe
to
it would
see
be
if there's,
confused happy.
yeah, it might. I mean, you could ask like, what is the moral character of the person laughing? And like they might be able to say like
There
that's
you
that's
go.
a bad dude. He's
Right.
gonna
He's
do
bad.
some he's gonna, hurt some people.
Yeah. He's happy doing bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
these days it might be like, oh, isn't that the third Spider-Man movie or something, right? In Shoreland, like,
Well, right. Yeah. Those kinds of experiments are becoming harder and harder to do
yeah,
to really get an isolated group.
yeah, yeah.
Even then, I mean, when I was down there 20 years ago, I mean, I think somebody had a Madonna poster inside their hut. I mean, you know,
Yeah, subjectively, this is the Chris Von Rune thing where somebody who was like 2 days upriver and he was like, Did you hear Michael Jackson just died?" Like, and Chris Von Rune was like, "What?" And we actually checked because we had him on, and I verified because he told me this when we were in grad school. It turns out Michael Jackson had died, and it
they
just
knew before him.
they knew before him. He actually left he had been on the boat, and during that time Michael Jackson had died, and it just transferred by word of mouth faster than Chris got there. So he got told some pop culture from 2 days upriver or something like
Yep.
that. Yeah.
That's the state of the world now.
Yeah.
And that was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Greg, we are getting toward the end. We always have the question of should we have asked you anything?
Mm. Uh, I can't really think of anything offhand. It seems like you guys have covered it a lot. Um, um, I guess you didn't really ask me about the non-human animal stuff. But I mean, I think there's sort of implied thing about the evolutionary history of these things is gonna, um, it's going to be the case that a lot of the phenomena we see in human vocalizations are going to be in non-human animal vocalizations. But
Yeah. Is there something important or like that you think people would it would be interesting to know about the non-human stuff?
I mean, I guess when I think about it in terms of play vocalizations, I think the interesting phenomena there is that the adaptive problem of signaling something about play is present, and then how it manifests itself in any given species is constrained by the communicative systems of that species. So play vocalizations have very different sounds across animals because they're incorporated into the vocal repertoire of those animals. And
Mm.
so the level of analysis there is more appropriate to think about the adaptive problem that's being solved. And I think that, that's where the adaptationist program is key. And maybe a lot of people that study that stuff in non-human animals aren't always adaptationists.
Mm.
Uh, so you might miss homologous features because you're not thinking about the adaptive problem enough. I
Mm.
used to say laughter was just a homologous across apes, and that was sort of what people had suggested before I started thinking about this. The other people that had, like Van Hoof and Provine and others, they would all really talk about primates. And now I've become convinced. I have this recent paper I did with anthropologist, grad student Sasha Winkler, looking at like every single instance of play vocalizations noted in the literature that we could find, 65 species, and all over the place, mammals mostly, but birds as well. And so the birds, I would say, that's convergent evolution, but with all the mammals, I think those play vocalizations are homologous. And I used to think that maybe like play vocalization in rats, saying rats laugh, which they do quite a bit. I used to think that was an analogy, that was convergent evolution and it wasn't homologous. But now I've been convinced that it's homologous, but it's
Wow.
just different, so different because rats are vocalizing in these high frequencies and people didn't even know they were doing it until
Mm.
they by accident like 25 years ago.
Wow.
But a rat laugh is at 50 kilohertz, which is well beyond what we can hear.
Wow.
And so, but I think it's a homologous behavior, even though it's radically different in terms of the acoustic properties. So I guess
So
that's one
laughter
thought I have.
might be like 100 million years old,
Exactly.
which
Definitely.
is crazy.
Now,
Yeah.
whether we call it laughter or not, I mean, do we want to call what humans do something unique, which I think it is unique?
Yeah.
Some people say chimps laugh, and then that's fair because they're close. But then do dogs laugh? And, I think, you get the risk of anthropomorphizing the
Yeah.
behavior. So I prefer the term
Certainly play
playful.
vocalizations are, probably 100 billion years old at least.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a nice little behavior to study in humans
Yep.
when it's something that's that ancient, and then it
Yeah.
gets incorporated into even things like conversational, like we're playing in this conversation we're having right now, we're playing, right?
Yep.
There's all kinds of elements of play in there, and
Yep.
and so it's occurring at the highest level of communication, it's getting incorporated into their repertoire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you have music instruments behind you? Do you want to either plug any of your existing music, or are you
Well,
going to
we'll
play a
just
song for us
we'll
after we
Oh,
refer
you
the
start?
mean plug it
listener.
as in like promote it, or plug it as in like plugging
Well,
up?
actually, I meant
Yeah.
they were both questions. I was going to say promote, but then the
See,
follow-up
mix up,
question
we're
is,
laughing.
yeah, exactly. It was a mix-up. Yeah.
We will plug your work. Greg has some cool music by the name of G. Bryant. He's got an album called Soft Assembly of a Diehard. I was just checking it out before we start talking. It's good stuff. So
Yeah, and if
Cool,
you're
check out
thanks.
Greg's
listening, if
music.
you're listening, do check out the YouTube for at least a moment to check out Greg's bass and banjo and hollow body electric, and there's a Strat on the floor or on the floor, and then there's a lap steel
Yeah.
guitar right in the corner. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Got all kinds of goodies. It's I'm not too crazy with the guitars. I only have really one of everything that of its kind,
Mm,
mostly.
yeah,
I have a couple basses, I guess. But yeah, I'm not like one of these people that has like a whole row of electric guitars that are all functionally the same. It's just like this one's the 1970,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
But
that.
that's because you still play it, right? You bought it and you play it. So your
I play
parents
them
were
all,
wrong. Your
yes.
parents were wrong.
And I sell stuff too. I unload equipment.
Very good.
And
Very good.
I'll forward
Well,
it.
Greg, super cool. Really encourage everybody to check out Greg's work. If especially if you're interested in anything acoustic modality, he is that is his he's the like the getaway driver of a heist movie. Greg is the audio modality for this neck of science. So it's super cool, Greg. I always love coming across your work, and it's yeah, it's I always like whenever I see your name on a paper, I'm always excited because I know I'm going to learn something new and crazy about
Oh,
sound.
cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Nice compliment. Well, it's been fun. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, I'm enjoying the other. I've been watching some of these, and I'm enjoying them. They're good conversations. So keep it up.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. David, it's funny to me that well, I guess if you listen to loud music, your ears get tired, but just listening to something, you don't feel like your ears get tired.
Yeah, if you're just listening to speech or to an
Yeah, like city
interview,
noise,
yeah,
like if you're overwhelmed, like you can have audio overstimulation if there's like too much music or
that
noise,
is true.
noise, yeah.
You need a break, you need a bit of silence.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it's in your ears.
No, yeah, I wonder, it's kind of an interesting psychological question, actually. Like, what is the function of sonic tiredness?
Yeah, or perceived effort seems to be unique. There's certain aspects of perceived effort across different sensation or perception
I mean,
systems.
it might be the opportunity cost thing that like,
How
you know, you
so?
can only listen or focus on certain sounds to the exclusion of others. And if you're just like listening
Mm.
to this particular type of sound, you're eventually like the opportunity costs get pretty big if like you're not getting any more information from that sound stream. I don't know.
But
You buy
so, but
that?
it is the idea that like if you're just hearing one thing, then there's not competition for your attention. It's less fatiguing.
Yeah,
Mm.
maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just bullshitting. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, a PSA is if you have after moving from Germany to the US, all this loud music and TVs in restaurants and third places,
Ugh, I hate loud
please
restaurants and
just
loud
let
bars.
people
Oh my God.
there's a, as David says, there's a loneliness epidemic. Please just turn it all off. Like
Oh
let
my
people just
God.
have conversations, please.
Don't get me started. Ugh,
Yeah.
and people have parties at these loud bars and you can't even hear anyone
Yeah.
talking. Like what?
Yeah.
Ugh, it drives me insane.
Yeah.
I
So
hate it.
just turn everything off and let people interact.
Yeah, could not
That's a
agree
good
more.
way. Yeah, great. I we should end here, but yeah, please do Patreon. What that, I mean, that was very reductive, but yeah, we have a Patreon account. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit that. What else can people do, David?
They can leave us a kind review. They can say nice things about us on social media. They can send us an email if they have any ideas for topics or guests. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, it was really nice to talk to Greg for 2 hours. I wish we could, oh, I don't know, play out his music. But you know what? I don't know if you know this, David, but I've been playing the full theme song at the end of the episodes because it's just so lovely.
Oh, thank you. That's
Yeah,
nice.
there's not enough glockenspiel in life.
I could not agree more. I'm a
Yeah,
big fan of the Glockenspiel.
yeah. So
Feel
sit back,
like,
relax, and
yeah.
enjoy the next 30 some. Sorry, I cut you off about glockenspiels. I don't want to cut
No, I
anyone
was
off
just gonna
about
say it
glockenspiels.
had a big moment in like the early 2000s. I feel like with the Harry Potter theme, you know, and
Mm,
then it just kind of disappeared. Like, what's the deal? Bring it
yeah.
back. It's a
Yes.
beautiful instrument.
So,
Lovely.
so that's our second rant here is turn everything off in these third places and bring back the glockenspiel.
Yep. Bring it back.
Yeah. See you next week.
See ya.